Feeling a little crispy out there right now. Feels like just a week or two ago, we were sitting around the 80-degree mark in the Lehigh Valley, and it is all kinds of fall right now. We're always keeping you warm and cozy on this thing called the Just Start the Conversation podcast. It's brought to you by St. Luke's Penn Foundation. Joined, as always, with my partner, Amie, Alanson, Dundon. Amie, how are we today? How are things? Are you feeling crispy, my friend?
Yeah, I would say I'm feeling crispy. I'm always feeling crispy, though. I'm good. Fall's my favorite season. I'm excited. Not so great recently for our local sports teams, but otherwise, so crispy negatively probably about them right now. But how about you?
No, I am on a gravy train with biscuit wheels, as always. Very excited to have another conversation today. Ben Iobst is with us. He's a retired Allentown Police Officer. We're getting ready to talk to, as we mentioned, fall. You're talking September, October, November. Obviously, Veterans Day just around the corner as well. So Ben is joining us today to talk about veteran and first responders, mental health, especially PTSD. Ben, we certainly appreciate you joining us on the show. Are you feeling crispy, my friend?
Define crispy.
A slight chill in the air, but it's like you're like, ooh, all right, I can deal with that. I can deal with sweatshirt weather right now as you're in your t-shirt, but I guess that's not.
I would say absolutely.
Okay.
I enjoy the fall, it's a little bit cooler, less humid. So.
Excellent. Well, we'll take a serious turn here as we get set on the Just Start the Conversation podcast. Ben, I want to start with you here because your experience as a member in law enforcement and relating to people who have been in the military, can we talk a little bit about your perspective on mental health and how it's kind of affected you? And especially as we get set list, and I mentioned Veterans Day, we just had Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. I think one of the things that guys in particular can have a hard time with is talking about when we have a problem, maybe when we need to seek help. I'm wondering for you how that, especially in your role in law enforcement, has played a role in your life, and how you can discuss that a little bit in your mental health.
Absolutely. So I have to go back with this. When I got out of the military, I went right into law enforcement work, and I really had the attitude that you can just kind of tough things out. If you keep on pushing, you're going to be able to handle it, and that's not the way it works. So over time, I've really developed a different attitude of it. So we go for our physical health. We go for physicals, right? Mm-hmm. We go to the gym. We generally stay in shape the best we can. If we have a twinge or a pang, something hurts, we go and get that checked out. If we don't feel well, we go to the doctor and get antibiotics. But our mental health, we just assume that it stays stasis, right? It goes into hibernation. Our mind is just there, and then when something happens, we can handle it, right? And that's really not the case. We've got to keep our mind in shape. And if we don't, when something comes along, it knocks us off, and it begins to send us into, a spiral and into a crisis. So really on the men's side of things, we got to talk about it. And it's important. It's absolutely key, and especially within the veteran and first responder world. Our life expectancy, some studies are saying that it's 57 years old, which is it's the same life expectancy as some war-torn countries, which is unacceptable. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that we do not talk about our issues. We don't make it front and center. We don't talk about the fact that we have to keep our minds in shape. And by not doing that, all those issues that start to crop up from too much stress, from not taking care of ourselves, from untreated complex PTSD, they're killing us. They're killing us in this line of work. And something's got to change, and talking about it's really the key.
Amie, I want to pivot to you there a little bit, because obviously this is a mental health podcast, but in particular with veterans and first responders, when it comes to mental health, the stigmas that are there, actually, I think a good place to start is, because we've been doing this podcast for a little while now, the conversations about mental health seem to be a lot stronger than they used to be. Mm-hmm. For somebody that's in your position, are you seeing that with members of law enforcement, members who have been in the military, and a little bit of a deeper dive into how mental health especially plays a role for them in their lives?
Yeah, I think we're making progress. I'll say that. Are we there yet? No. If we think about trying to transform a cultural, embedded kind of brick wall and take the bricks out piece by piece by piece, going back hundreds of years, it doesn't happen overnight. I feel like the wall is maybe halfway down. I feel like over the last couple hundred years, we've made some progress. More recently, the last 5, it's been really, really good. I think stigma has gotten better. It's still there. I think through Ben's work and folks like Ben in promoting post-traumatic growth and conversation about substance use disorder and teaching healthier coping skills and teaching our law enforcement folks how to interact with people who are in the middle of a mental health breakdown, and thereby being forced to kind of identify it in themselves and work through their own issues, and having peer support specialists who are veteran peers and are veteran trained. We're putting all of the right pieces of the puzzle in place, and sometimes it takes some people a little bit longer to come around to the fact that, yeah, I need help or I need to go see somebody. And, we've talked about this before on podcasts for first responders and military folks. Trust is very, very hard to earn. So, for Ben to be able to trust me, it's a build of a relationship. It is not an overnight, here's who you're going to go see, go see him tomorrow. It doesn't work like that. There have to be warm handoffs that feel good for people, because first responders and veterans are taught to have barriers up to protect themselves. It's self-preservation. It's something that they have to be taught to do. So then to come in and say, yeah, about you having to protect yourself and keep those walls up, I need you to tear them all down in the next 24 hours. That doesn't happen.
Yeah. And you bring up a great point. That really comes from lots of trauma. That it's not necessarily paranoia. It's trained in, and it's also a protective measure that first responders and veterans have. But what that comes from is, the average member of the public will see maybe 0 to about 10 very, very difficult, horrible things over the course of their lives. And these are those things that cause PTSD in the general public. And, when we run into these individuals, we say, oh, well, they went through a hard event. That's why we have to be sensitive to the way they are and why they don't trust people. We do that for the general public, but flip that over to the first responder or the veteran. The general public, 0 to 10 horrible incidents. You take a city police officer, it's going to be in the upwards of 500 to 600 horrific things that they've experienced. And we wonder why they're paranoid, and we wonder why they worry, and they're not trusting. And that's where planting those seeds is so important. And through a lot of the local work that we've been able to do, we get trusted and vetted providers. So we meet with them. We have a wellness team where we meet with the providers. We make sure that they're good and culturally competent for first responders and veterans. And then we let the vets know, hey, or the first responders, hey, this person's good to go. And that really helps with, again, planting that seed of recovery to hopefully get people to start taking care of themselves.
I want to talk a little bit about the turning point, Ben, because those numbers are staggering, especially when you talk about for military and first responders. I feel like obviously in this situation, there's, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming it's not typically just one particular traumatic event that sets off the ultimate, I need to go and talk to somebody. For you, what do you feel like the mental health turning point was? Because as you mentioned, all of these PTSD and kind of head always on a swivel and all of these things compounding. At what point in the challenges of mental health did you find that a turning point was here? Like, I'm here now. I got to go and talk to somebody now.
So backing up, basically the way that I had developed the way I was doing things in the military in my early time in the police world was kind of like you're issued a sharp knife, right? And as it dulls, I thought I just keep pushing harder. As it gets dull, you can still cut. You just need to push harder. But what do we know about a dull knife? It's pretty dangerous, right? It can slip and cut us, and that's real similar to kind of how I viewed it. And a lot of first responders and vets view things where they're just going to keep on pushing it. They don't recognize that you need to take a break, resharpen, and maintain your tools. And if we don't do that, that becomes a problem. But for me, really, the thing that changed everything for me, honestly, was having my first child. When my oldest daughter was born, it no longer was strictly my own. I always had like this sacrificial mentality, like I'll serve the public no matter what, and if I need to run in and get hurt, well, then that's my job. But when we had our first kid, it no longer was. That wasn't like my choice to make anymore, right? That was now, if I'm not around and I'm not healthy, someone is not going to have a dad. So that really made me have to take a look inward. And other first responders, veterans, and my family saying, hey, you don't seem to be doing too good. And one of the keys there is, and Amie talked about this already, kind of trying to break down that wall and get that trust. They have to be ready, but we have to also let them know two different things. One, when you're ready, there's help available. And two, it is not weak to get help. It actually shows strength because you can become stronger from learning and healing from those incidents. One of the best examples I could use is kind of going back to physical health. If you break your leg and you have to take some time off and get a surgery maybe to let it heal and do some physical therapy, is that weakness? No, it's not. It's just being responsible with your body. And that same mentality is what we really need to start doing with our minds, and change the idea again that it's something that stays in stasis and that there's a weakness there if it starts to slip. It's not. We have to keep our mind in shape, and if it suffers an injury, a psyche injury, it needs to be treated. So again, the thing that changed for me was having a family, and then also those supports being there. Them being there made it so that when I was ready, I could act on them. And it took some searching back then, so now we try to really put the resources front and center so that guys and girls know, hey, if I am hurting, I can get help right away.
As a civilian, it's interesting that you say that, because I would think as a civilian that the thing that would maybe want you to go and get, kind of your mental health checked out would be a traumatic experience in a negative kind of way. And you're almost looking at it from the positive approach of like, look, I'm going to be a dad. Like I can't be where the word you used was sacrificial. Like I'm not just playing for me anymore. There's a family here. Amie, I kind of want to pivot there to you, because I think that's kind of a fascinating thing. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, if I'm stepping out of line here, but I feel like for most people, Amie, maybe in your position, would you say that the almost positive side of things or something that might bring people to talk to you? Obviously, if we've got family, and Ben, you alluded to your support system, which is amazing. I find that fascinating, though, that idea of almost like feeling like, like you're in this for more than yourself now is a reason that I want to go and talk to somebody. Do you find that that's a common conversation for you, or the flip side of that, where it's typically more, the unfortunate traumatic circumstances that bring people your way?
In my experience, it's probably pretty equal. It's been rarer for me to have somebody like Ben walk in and say, I need to get my stuff together because I'm a dad and I need to sit down and figure this out. Kudos to Ben, because that's probably on the rarer side.
That's amazing.
To be fully, transparent, it wasn't just simply that.
Sure. No, I understand. But
there's a lot of life motivators.
But listen. And again, as I think that to the civilian, there's probably in your mind sacrifices that if you're a non-military, non-law enforcement, as a civilian in general, you're probably thinking there are things about my life that I have to change because I'm starting a family. Yours obviously is kind of well beyond, we've talked about some of the statistics that are already out there. So I just found that as kind of, one of the questions that we have here is about like something that you wish more people understood, which is kind of what led me down to this question, because, I would think that for most people, speaking as a civilian myself, that it would have been an unfortunate circumstance that leads you to want to have these conversations. And for you, it was, yes, you said that, there was certainly things in your past that you wanted to address, but that this was really the turning point for you, I think is kind of fascinating. And so, Amie, again, kind of coming back to you on that, the idea of, that being the way that you kind of start your conversation, and then the support systems. Can we talk a little bit about those support systems? Because for some, Ben, you're lucky. I would say that you had a family and a great support system with you. There's probably a lot of guys and girls in law enforcement and military who maybe don't have that so much, and maybe need to lean on their coworkers and their fellow military members and feel like they don't. So to get these open arms around people, just how maybe we can help facilitate that for folks.
Yeah, there's no wrong door, right? So if somebody ends up walking into an ER or walking into their PCP office or walking into their captain, at work, or calling an old military buddy, it doesn't matter. There's no wrong door. We'll take you any way you get here. I think we're seeing more and more military first responders, and I'll say who else I'll put in that category are your frontline medical professional who are our trauma workers, are folks that are seeing daily trauma all day. Definitely more people are like, hey, you know what? You guys are doing a great job educating us on trauma and anxiety and depression. Now I'm ready. So we're seeing a whole lot more hands go up than we ever used to, right? And some of those people have, to your point, Crockett, a really good support system at home, and some don't have any. But the nice thing is that groups like Ben has put together, and really all over the country, there are more and more first responder wellness groups and military veteran wellness groups coming together to, Ben's telling me about a day that they're doing coming up where they're going to have a wellness day and be able to kind of give folks a chance to unwind a little bit and have some time with colleagues and figuring out how to work on their emotional self. And there are years past when that day may have come and nobody would have showed up.
Yeah.
That's probably more likely than not. But now he'll have that day. Yep. And people will show up and people will say, yeah, I'm in. I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to make this a priority. So I think sometimes people end up walking into therapy for, hey, I just need help on, figuring out how to deal with this issue with my child. And then it turns into, oh, by the way, I'm a retired, police captain, and these are the things that make me not sleep at night. These are my memories. This is the stuff that's flashing up, and this is what's causing me to not be able to be a great parent. So if once we peel the layers of the onion away, sometimes what they walked in the door for isn't really what's going on. But again, no wrong door. Whatever you feel like you need to come in and start with, we'll get there. We'll peel those layers away, and we'll get you the help you need. We'll get you the support you need, and we'll get to those issues.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It's generally, and we've talked about this already a little bit. The critical incidents, those horrible things, those obviously play a role, and usually it's a good amount of the percentage of what's causing the issues is a whole bunch of those critical incidents stacked back to back. But what gets people in the door and willing to get the help, generally it's not the self-recognition of, hey, that incident really bothered me.
Yeah.
It's the, I decided to go buy something to make myself feel better, like two trucks and a boat or something like that. So then now you don't have the money, so you start working overtime, and then you start having marital issues, and then you're still experiencing these horrific incidents, and then you can't sleep and you start drinking, and all these things start to weigh them down. And with the tempo of first responder work, And, a lot of people in the medical profession too, they don't have time to self-reflect. So by the time they turn around, they're in horrific amounts of debt. They've got a drinking problem. They're at risk of divorce, and they're completely overloaded. And
that's usually what happens. That's a great description, Ben.
So I want to talk a little bit about the understanding or misconceptions that you feel like are out there for members of the military or law enforcement. And, we're addressing things today already. I feel like we've already answered a couple of those questions on just what we as a civilian might understand about the mental health of our military and law enforcement and first responders. So kind of a two-part question for you here, Ben, because I typically will go to Amie with one part of this, but I'm going to go with you. So that first part's going to be just maybe some things that you feel like are misunderstood for military and first responders. And also, Amie, the question I usually ask for you is where people should start in this process. Ben, for you, I feel like that's a great question for you. If all of a sudden maybe you see somebody that it could be the way they're talking, it could be a social post, it could be through the grapevine. How would you talk to somebody and tell them the first steps or the first people that maybe they should talk to if they feel like that is a good option for them going down the road?
Absolutely. All right. So the first thing I would say, that willingness to recognize that we need to watch each other. That's where we normally notice these things. I'd love to say we're going to be able to train everybody, and then they're suddenly going to have this recognition that they're having issues and they're going to go get help. Probably not going to happen. But what we've seen, especially in the police world, is I've seen guys in the past come to work having very severe health issues. And, I've seen guys come to work actively having heart attacks. And what ends up getting them to get help is the officers, the first responders next to them, knowing what they're looking for and training each other to, recognize what being unhealthy in a mental health capacity looks like, and then how to approach our brothers and sisters, and then how to get them help is absolutely key. And then the only thing I suggest for the individual is just recognize and be willing to accept that help. And I almost would equate it like this. If I'm showing signs of a stroke, right? If I'm getting drooping in the face, numbness in the arm, and a friend or a coworker comes up and says, "Hey man, you don't look good. You're showing signs of a stroke. Let's get you to the hospital." I'm not going to tell you, "I'm fine, go away, mind your own business," right?
Sure.
But that's what we do when we're showing somebody that we're not mentally healthy. So what I generally would recommend is just recognize it's not people being nosy. It might be somebody pointing out, hey, it's time to do some work. Now, where do you go for the work? A couple different things. Regionally, we have a first responders wellness group. It's called LVLEO, Lehigh Valley Law Enforcement and Emergency Services Officers Wellness Group. If anybody wants to get in touch with me about that, I'm sure you guys will put my email on the screen. Yeah. So, okay. You can email me. And we vet out all sorts of things and everything that covers the wellness triangle. And this is all free. We just do it. It's a volunteer thing that we do. It's first responders helping first responders. And on there, there'll be all sorts of resources, also a lot of peer stuff. One of the other things that they can do if they want to, first responders and veterans can come to a couple of different support groups that we run. We have one that is on Wednesday nights at 6 o'clock. And then we have another one that's Thursday nights at 6 o'clock. And then we have one for substance use recovery Sunday nights at 6 o'clock. And we'll get you guys that information so you can get that out online too. And then there's a lot of other groups out there too. There's Victory for Veterans. That's run by Rob Brands. That's a great program. On top of that, there's a lot of local nonprofits that do great work with first responders and veterans that people can reach out to. So there's no shortage of what's out there, but the problem is, again, we have to get the willingness, and that's where it is absolutely key.
Yeah, and I think wherever you're listening from right now, anywhere in the country, because we have listeners that aren't necessarily local, I would say, start with your primary care doc. Go there first. Get yourself medically checked, physically checked, and then have that conversation with your doc. Is a good place to start. And then go to your county. Every county has mental health and drug and alcohol programs, and they'll be able to point you in the right direction if you're not necessarily local to us.
Absolutely. And if your area doesn't have a first responder or a veterans peer group, start one. That's how we started. There wasn't anything here, and we decided to start something. And that's a lot of times what is so important is we recognize that there's a lack of resources or supports, and instead we get stuck in the pain side of it, or we just complain that this is here and there's no one here to help me, or et cetera, et cetera. When the reality is there's probably 10 people locally that feel the same way. And if you get them together, suddenly you have a support group. And all you have to do is find people that have been through similar experiences and have a willingness to help.
Sometimes it's as simple as saying, hey, we're all meeting for coffee at this diner on Saturdays at 9, and get the word out. And then it starts that way.
Yeah, that's amazing. Amie, I want to come to you. We mentioned support groups. We mentioned the community in general. A little deeper dive into the seat that you're in particular. When it comes to therapy or interventions or anything that are available for folks, is there anything that you have seen, aside from just the numbers being better themselves, people just coming in general, those numbers, those statistics you mentioned, especially in the last 5 years or so, have gotten so much better. From the seat that you're in, do you feel like there are any particular, I guess the word I'm looking for is approaches that perhaps you found have been successful for the men and women that are coming to get some help?
So, for sure, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is always a go-to, because we have to really work on changing what we're telling ourselves that's leading us to the depression or the despair or the anxiety. It's all about self-talk, right? So, and it's years and years and years of being taught to think a certain way to protect yourself. So it's kind of like, unraveling a super glued puzzle, to kind of reframe those thoughts. I'm a big fan of CBT for first responders, but also PTSD is real, man. I'm a huge fan of narrative trauma work. I do it all the time with folks with complex PTSD who I work with.
Can you explain that a little deeper? So, I mean, obviously I can see Ben nodding along there. For people, the civilian folk here who don't exactly know what these things are, can you just give a little bit more of an in-depth on what that process is?
Sure. Certainly it's not necessarily a quick process, but one of the things that happens when we experience cumulative trauma over years is that every time our brain experiences a traumatic event, there's like a glitch in the brain matrix, is kind of how I explain it. Like you're going along, boop, there's a stop wherever that trauma happened. We recover, then we go along. And then there's like a stop in our kind of connective matrix in our brain. So one of the things that narrative trauma does is it helps us using things like EMDR, using things like writing your story of the traumas to develop a timeline and take a look at what you did to cope during those times, or what you did, to cope negatively during those times, and put those pieces back together so that you no longer have breaks in your story. And obviously we do that through clinical therapy. You need a clinically trained therapist to be able to do narrative trauma work, but our brain is changed with every trauma we experience. So think about the 500, 600, 700 glitches in your matrix for every one of those car accidents you saw, somebody that shot at you, somebody, all of those times when your system, even if you didn't necessarily feel it, your system was taxed in that moment, and it changes your brain. It just does. It changes trauma changes the neurochemistry of your brain. So complex trauma therapy, and there's all different ways we do that, helps us to reconnect that timeline for you. And it helps us to help you make sense of why you're feeling and thinking the way you're feeling and thinking, and then how to reframe that for yourself. But we have to make your story whole again.
Yeah, I agree with that. The only thing I would add is sometimes, and you've probably seen this a lot, they may not even know which incident or which series of incidents.
Oh, no.
It's
Yeah.
not like the typical what you would see in a movie, like, oh, there was one bad incident and
Sure.
that's what's locked in forever.
Sure.
They may have no clue, and it may just be from the accumulation of all these different traumas, and they have no clue which ones are, and that's perfectly okay.
Yeah.
And you may never
It
know.
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Generally, there's usually one, the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, this was the one that sent me to the bar, and I just escaped in alcohol or whatever. So we'll start there. But, complex trauma is sneaky. And your brain will want to piece itself back together in the easiest way possible. And usually, if we don't have the right supports or the right knowledge or the right friends around us, it puts itself back together with overspending, over shopping, over drinking, over drugging.
Yeah.
And then that just makes all of those traumatic memories even foggier and more distant, and you're further away from healing.
We start living in coping rather than thriving.
Yeah.
We're no longer living life. I was about to hop into, so we talked about it a little tiny bit at the beginning, and that's that post-traumatic growth. And that's the other side of the coin of post-traumatic stress disorder, which is it's not a lifelong disorder. It doesn't mean you're broken. It means you had an injury, and you may need to, do some therapy, physical therapy, in the injury stance. And also if we have an injury, we may walk a little different. We may have to move a little different, but it doesn't mean we're permanently broken. And that's where that post-traumatic growth can come from, which is finding whatever it may be, the lessons in those difficult incidents, those difficult traumatic situations. Every single situation, no matter how horrible, has something to teach us, and to try to interpret what those lessons are, and then to put those to work in a positive way in our lives. That's where that post-traumatic growth comes into play. And that's through processing. It doesn't happen overnight. But that's the other side of the coin. We talk a lot about post-traumatic stress disorder, but nobody talks about what happens after post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic growth. That's what happens. But that's if we positively deal with and process. We go to the hypothetical mental health gym, we get our mind back in shape and we do that physical therapy. Then we experience the post-traumatic growth.
Yeah. I think that's the hard part. You alluded to, if somebody's showing symptoms of a stroke, we've talked about a broken leg. You can't see. You can't see. You hope that your support system can see changes in your demeanor, but there's not a clear physical thing that suggests I'm really going through it right now. And so for support systems out there, for significant others, for family, for friends, for our coworkers, our military members that are with us, it's important to keep our eyes open and be there to lend a hand and some love when these situations are presenting themselves. I think we learned a lot today. I'll tell you, it's fascinating. Hosting a podcast, I typically try to take what is like the listener approach. Like I'm in charge of setting up questions and doing all that stuff. But this was an interesting one for me in particular as the civilian to some of these numbers that you were giving, Ben. They're difficult to hear almost. And so you want to make sure that our first responders, our law enforcement, our military members that are out there know that there are people out there for you with arms open. It's a link. It's a coffee shop. It's a coffee stop at the diner, like you said, Amie. There are options there for you. The willingness needs to be there. And so hopefully we've seen it come a long way in the last few years. We can hopefully continue to see that grow. Ben, this was an excellent conversation today, man. Insightful for sure. I really appreciate your time this morning. One more time, if people want to reach out to you, get in touch with you, the best possible way that they could do that.
Yeah, probably should an email would probably be the best way. So it's BIOBST at B as in boy, T as in tango, I as in India, consultingservice.com. That's the fastest way to get to me is just shoot me an email.
And we'll make sure that we have that email posted with this podcast as well. Amie, as always, insightful and informative, and yeah, let's help each other out. Yeah. Communities out there, spread the word, spread the love. PTSD is a real thing. And so the more people that we can be there to be supportive is an amazing thing. Amie, thank you as always for helping keeping this conversation go along today. Your insight was wonderful as always. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I just want to thank I want to thank Ben. I want to thank you for your service. I want to thank you, everyone who is listening, who's a first responder or a veteran or a family member of a first responder or a veteran or a trauma worker in a hospital. We need each other. And I just want to make sure that you all know as helpers, how we all appreciate what you do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kudos to that. And kudos to you, Ben. I'll second that. It's the Just Start the Conversation podcast. It's brought to you by St. Luke's Penn Foundation. You can find this podcast at pennfoundation.org or wherever you get your podcasts. For Ben Iobst, for Amie, Alanson, Dundon, I am Crockett. Thank you so much for joining us on the Just Start the Conversation podcast.